Hello and welcome to another episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. And today we'll be taking a look at the X Plus 25cm Shin Godzilla 2016 figure. This video will be in a slightly different format to my normal fully edited reviews, and that's just because I'm doing it like sort of quick, impromptu, off the top of my head, not written down or no script or whatever, because I've actually sold this figure, and I'm going to go into why later in the video. This guy later today, so I'm trying to make the most of having this guy in my presence. And yeah, so let's just quickly start off the review. Before we get into the figure, I've got the box just over here, so it's got a slightly different box than most X Plus figures. In fact, the box is bigger than most 30cm scale X Plus figures, actually. So it's a brown cardboard box with just a black and white sort of label, well, black and brown really. I really like the front of this box. It's got a great image. It's pretty big, so you can just see it in scale here. Nothing too fancy. He does obviously come with the tail in 2 bits in the box, so you have to do the classic sort of heat him up at the base here, and maybe put the tail in the fridge or something when you get them, just to get it extra sturdy, and then you stick it in and then it's all together. But there's the box. I can open it up for you guys quickly. Oh gosh, okay. You know, your standard sort of little clamshell thing, a bunch of wires in there to hold them in place and stuff. It's got a little instruction booklet too. I mean, it's still taped in there. I've never actually looked at it, but it pretty much just tells you how to put the tail on, so I'm not gonna bother showing you that. You know, not much on the back of the box, just some legal information. This is the Japanese release, by the way. I don't know if it's been re-released yet as a what's that company called that re-releases these things? Got it on PX Preview exclusive. I don't know. This is not the USA release. This is a Japanese release. Still made in China though, so probably all made in the same factory anyway. But distributed in Japan, and that's where I ordered this guy from originally, somewhere around probably the end of 2016, maybe something like that, or when just not long after this guy came out, basically. So getting into the actual figure, you can see this is, even though this guy is a 25cm scale figure, he's actually really big. He's almost 30cm tall. Do a size comparison and all that for sure later in the video. His tail, first of all, is huge. Like the biggest figure tail of any figure I have. I probably might have 2 that are a little longer, but that's just because those figures are about twice this guy's height, at least. So for the size, this guy has huge tail. Going into the sculpt, which is something that I have a somewhat controversial opinion on. As we know, X Plus are known for having extremely highly accurate and highly detailed sculpts. Especially in some recent figures, they've been doing really good. I have a small collection here. I've got 1984, and I've got 2004 here, and I got an Anguirus down there, and a 60s or 70s Gigan, I forget. And I've got up there, I've got a 1954 Godzilla 30cm. So I have some experience with X Plus figures, and oh yeah, and I've actually got a Shin Godzilla. You can't see it because it's just off screen on the shelf somewhere over there, but I have the X Plus 25cm scale Shin Godzilla Form 2. So what's his name? Kamata-kun. So I love that figure, and so I'm not here to bash on X Plus or anything. I regard them as being a very high quality manufacturer of Godzilla figures. However, I have a slight issue with the sculpt with this guy, and I brought it up in my video about the Banpresto Shin Godzilla figure, which is this one right here. Whoops, and there goes your Jaguar. It's okay, you can all lie down. There we go. But this is that figure here. If anyone wants to see that more in depth, go check out that video. I might have that in the end of the video. I might have a link to that, but I have an issue with this figure, and this one really sort of brought that issue forward for me, because even though this figure does have a good sculpt, I feel like for X Plus standards, it's a bit of a letdown. I'm gonna tell you why, even though I already went over it in this video. I don't know, let's just give this guy a fair chance before we get into that. So, I'm gonna show you a couple close-ups of this guy, so you can see the sculpt. I will admit the actual texture on him is pretty good. He's definitely not sculpted by an idiot like some figures out there, and I will give them credit that sculpting a Shin Godzilla figure to begin with is a very challenging thing to do, just because of the nature of the design. He's very chaotic and very sort of nasty looking to begin with, so to capture that well, you need to be a very skilled sculptor and know what you're doing really to get the essence of the design, because it's like, especially the face, that's one of the major things. My main issue with this guy, if the camera would ever focus alright, sorry for cutting away, but the camera just wasn't focusing. But my main issue with this guy is the face, primarily, although the same issues sort of apply throughout most of the body. You can see he has a very broad sort of features on his face, and those teeth there are very overpowering. Like, visually, they're very bright and very thick looking. And his nose has a very broad shape. A lot of the details are kind of like smushed in there, and it wasn't refined very much. It feels like this whole sculpt was kind of rushed based on like the film coming out, and they just had to put out the figure really soon. And that's why I feel like there's the 30 centimeter, I think that's a Yuji Sakai sculpt, coming out at some point. It might already be out. I haven't been following because I can't really afford to get into any X pluses at this point in time, but you can tell that it's Shin Godzilla and it's a good figure. I'll give it that. It's like, it's got a really great presence, this one. But when you get up really close to some of the details, like on the face, especially when you're comparing it to the Banpresto, stuff like the feet and the hands, no comparison. The Banpresto blows this one out of the water. The Banpresto's not perfect either. Like, the face is a bit off, especially the way that the sculpt is cut in some areas, and a couple of things. But maybe this one's a little thin, his snout at the front. But you know, you can tell when you really look at the detailing in this, the textures, the sort of the elegance of the form. You can tell that a very skilled artist sculpted the Banpresto, whereas this one is, his stance and his features are very sort of slopped on, I feel. And granted, a lot of the texturing on him is really nice, and just the feel of the figure and the presence of such a large figure is really cool, and it's got like the X Plus sort of manufacturing quality. But the sculpt is a bit of a letdown. So yeah, I like on this figure, I think the tail turned out the best. Like the sort of gnarliness at the back of the tail, if it focuses again. Okay, so you can see some of it there. Not the best quality, but it's out of focus again. But you know, that turned out really nicely on this figure, a lot better than the Banprestos. But oh god. Sorry, Banpresto, I'll get you off the stage for a sec. But we'll come back to that figure, but I'll give it credit, that detail is really beautiful. Just the texturing down the whole tail is really nice, and you can see some of that red coming through. It actually, in person, is a lot darker, the red. People say it's very noticeable on this figure as compared to other ones, which is kind of a complaint with a lot of other figures, that it's not noticeable, but I don't know, in person this figure is very dark as well. It's really hard to accomplish that with a figure, unless you, there's some cool mods that people do where they take off the tail and they put in LED lights inside this whole thing, like little Christmas lights. Obviously don't get ones that heat up, but like ones that shine cold. And you put them all through there, and it makes that red glow, and that's a really cool thing about this figure that you can do. So there are some videos about that I'd advise anyone who has this figure to look up and maybe give that a try. But the texturing's really nice throughout the tail. On the body, it's still good, although it kind of like it looks a little more rushed in areas too. Like you can definitely tell it was like hand sculpted. Like you can tell that with the Banpresto too, but when you look at it from a distance, you really can't. But with this one, you kind of can. Again, like those teeth are really bothering me. They are such a focal point on this figure and make his mouth look so just like lathered with pasty cream color. And if you look at any image of the film, his teeth are actually really subtle unless you're looking at a close-up of him. They're just very needly, very thin, just this subtle sort of creepiness, which I'd say is kind of like the fault of the vinyl material that this is made of. But then if we look at the Banpresto, which is made of a soft vinyl, a softer material, which holds detail a lot worse than the hard vinyl that this one's made of. This one has a really subtle, very needly teeth, and it's smaller and a soft vinyl, so that's not a good excuse. Anyway, I didn't mean for this to be a comparison video, but the Banpresto, it's such a good example of everything that bothers me with this figure, which is ultimately why I sold it. And it's not really why I sold it. I sold it because of those issues, combined with the fact that this is the most expensive Shin Godzilla figure that I own, and it's not anywhere close to my favorite one. I really like the Monster Arts one, and the Banpresto, I really love that one. And I might even like this Bandai vinyl more, just because I don't feel like, oh my god, I spent so much on this thing, as much as I spend on all my other X Plus figures, if not more. And actually, it probably was a bit more than half of them at least. And this one just feels like they just didn't quite get there as they tend to, and they really could have, you know, because X Plus do great things, and I'm really hoping that the 30cm one is, you know, back up there, which is looking to be. It's looking to be very, very much up there. It's probably going to be infinitely expensive, and I'm almost certainly not going to be picking that one up, unfortunately, although it pains me to picture not owning that one. But anyway, let's get back to the details. He's kind of like his legs and like his whole hip area feel very lumpy. There's no real definition into his legs. Again, you have the nice red coming through and some cool texture. And the feet are disappointing. Just look at that. They look like Play-Doh feet. They're just sort of... The texturing is nice on them. They have like nice feathering, of course. But the actual form is very rushed. Although my focus on my camera today is irritating, but oh, okay, there we go. That's pretty good. Especially look underneath them; they just like very blobbed on. Nothing that great. You can even see just like where it's been kind of like sculpted. There's no real refined shape under there or anything. Just very rounded off, very chunky looking, which is not how he was. Look at again the Banpresto. This is how he looked in the film. Even look at the Monster Arts, because that one's, I believe that one is either sculpted by the guy who did the maquette, whatever, however you pronounce it, for just that they did base the actual CGI, they scanned it into the computer and did the CGI of Shin Godzilla 4, or they actually just used the CGI to make the monster art. So if you're ever in doubt, look at that one. But this one's a bit bigger and just sculpted really beautifully. There's just a lot of elegance there, which you can see a lot more red coming off this guy. Again, it's a lot brighter on camera than in person. Again, it's just, you can see his claws have that beautiful curve to them. Again, they're thinner and more sharper than anything if the focus works. But obviously you see that striking texture through his legs and that definition there. And just the kind of elegance to the shape of this thing, where we really don't get that here. You just see these thighs that just like are just melting into him, and the round curves. And granted, this figure actually looks really good. I think it looks really good outside in like real sunlight, where it's kind of, the grooves in the sculpt get a lot more definition and the highlights sort of come out and the texture's really nice. But still, in comparison to this figure, the texturing, though really good, is not quite there. The spines on him are pretty nice though. There's not much I can complain about the spines. Again, they're kind of thicker too than say some of the other figures, like especially the monster arts. That one has the best spines of any Shin Godzilla figure I've seen, and we'll take a look at that later, I guess. Will this focus? I do like his eyes. If they'd focus, they're nice and small. They might be still a bit bigger than they were in the film, but they have a nice round shape, glossy. And I've had the same. His chest is not bad actually, but his hands also have that same issue where they just kind of seem. I'm a sculptor myself. Like I'll just show you guys a quick example of a figure that I've been working on. I'm a sculptor, but in my spare time, but I don't finish anything very regularly, but I consider myself somewhat competent in sculpting. So this is something I've been working on. His toes are a bit broken off there because this is a pretty old figure that I need to finish up and set. But there's a little 2001 that I've been working on. I have a Megalon and some other sort of kind of crappy ones that I've done in the past, but I don't know. It looks better when he's not all broken in pieces, but I have some experience in the art of sculpting Godzilla figures, and I have experience just by looking at other figures, knowing when a sculpt is good. And if you look at this guy's hands, again, he has, it doesn't, the focus is all off. I'm terribly sorry. This video is very rushed again, but I don't know, he just has that very sort of, you know, that gnarly sort of pose. His fingers are very thin in a very dynamic pose. This guy, like, all of his fingers, his thumb is like this, and the rest of his fingers are very even and very evenly spaced, and they're about the same size, and there's no dynamics to them, no sort of character, really. They're just kind of mushed in there, and it just kind of embodies my whole sort of issue with this figure, which is very subtle, but it's something that carries through to every aspect of this figure's sculpt. Whoa. Oh god. Sorry again, very rushed video. Stuff happens. You can go away again. What else can I say about the sculpt? his proportions aren't bad. His, you know, his head's pretty small. From some angles, it looks really good. From others, it looks meh. I mean, it's nothing like the NECA figure. That one has, ooh, that one has issues. But some aspects of the NECA figure I actually like better than this figure too. But you know, if you go through my Banpresto figure review, I do go into a number of figures and like what's good about them and what's bad, and like why I ultimately prefer the Banpresto as just the most all-rounded, so most balanced Shin Godzilla figure. And I go through the NECA one and the Monster Arts and the Banpresto and this one too. But that's pretty much my thoughts on the Sculpt. I think he's from a distance he looks pretty good. Definitely from a distance, apart from, I don't know, some of the seam lines aren't the best place, and again his legs just kind of feel too mushed together, and something about the pose is a little bit too static. There's not that elegance or that posture, the grandeur that you sort of get out of some of the other figures like the Banpresto, or the ways that you can pose the Monster Arts, or even the Bandai. Kind of, it embodies embodies that character a little more, and I really like the face sculpt on the Bandai. Even though a lot of people have issues with this figure, for what it is, I really like it. But before we get into the size comparison, I'll just briefly go over the paint again. So he's done in a very matte charcoal gray, which is nice, and he's made of a bright red plastic, so he's cast in bright red plastic that's then painted over with a matte gray charcoal black sort of color. And you have that nice red coming through, especially down the tail, which is really good. And one of the best aspects, again, is the way they painted this whole gnarly gore bit at the end of his tail in like a bone-colored, they brushed it over in this bone-colored color, and it's kind of, you get this big gray down in there, a bit of like browny red in the gaps, and it's a little bit glossy-ish, but it just kind of, it looks good, and it feels really tough and bony. Or I mean, it looks like it would feel really tough and bony. And I really like down the tail, they got the red stripes coming through really well. That's pretty much where the red is most noticeable, down the tail and on the back. But again, this red in person, at least like in the sort of light that I have in my room or inside, unless you're like in bright sunlight, is pretty dull too. There's not much you can do about that, but it's there. You know, as you can see, it goes down the back between the spines, just like all the Shin Godzilla figures pretty much. On camera it looks like there's a lot more on the spines, but in person, again, harder to see, but looks great on camera, I must say, that red. It's got that same bone color on his teeth that are on his claws and his feet. They're just kind of pretty solidly colored on the toenails. They have like a bit of darker color coming off the bottom, so that's nice. They have a bit of a transition, as well as some of these little claws on his feet still have that painted really cleanly. That's good to see. Like you can see it there. Again, these are painted really nicely and manufactured really well, but the claws do look better on most of the other figures that I've mentioned, like the Monster Arts and the Banpresto figure, especially. Even though I feel like the paint job is better on this thing than, say, maybe the Monster Arts, even though I don't really have any major issues with mine. Mine, I got lucky with mine, it's a good one. But this one is... the sculpt is pretty much where my issues with this thing lie, but the paint's pretty solid. It's not the most interesting paint job, of course. It's pretty flat, basic, no real highlights apart from the red coming throughout the body. And what else? The inside of his mouth is actually so hard to see that I can't really see it, but it's probably just left red or something. Or maybe not. It's probably going over with like a brown color by the looks of it. Yeah, it's got that same brown color that they primed this tail with before they went over it with the cream color. Yeah, I don't know. It's like you can really tell that this thing was hand sculpted. Like you can see like the forms of the clay that they lumped onto it and just kind of like scratched in a bit of the texture here and there, which I kind of like when you can see that. That's why I like Yuji Sakai's sculpts, because you can see, if you look really closely, you can see that they're hand sculpted, and that's really awesome. But when you step back, you can't see that. It just looks like the suit completely almost. With this though, it's a lot more obvious from further away that this is like, it's been sculpted in and all that, and I just feel like this sculpt could have been really great had they have taken the time a little more with it. So I'm guessing that they were under a lot of time pressure when making this, so maybe this was a junior sculptor over at X Plus or something, or God only knows. But that's the paint job and the sculpt, and my sort of overall thoughts on it. I really love the size of this thing again, huge figure, and so that's why now we're gonna go get into the size comparison. So put them with some Bandai vinyls. So here we have the King Series Bandai figure, and just the standard standard Bandai figure. So he's actually pretty much the same size as the King Series. Like, they're actually really similar, apart from the tail, where this one has a gorgeously huge tail. A lot more screen accurate, and this one they like messed it up and lumped it all together and made it this short little thing. But if you have the King Series and you're wondering how big this one is, pretty much the same height. He's leaning down a little lower and his head's a bit smaller, and so like it feels like some features on this one feel smaller than the King Series. Like the body feels a little smaller, but the tail makes up for a lot of the hugeness. But yeah, you can see them there. They're really close in size. Again, I really like the King Series, even though this one, the sculpt is not as, I don't know, like the sculpt is not as well defined as this one, but I feel like this one is kind of more accurate, because this one's, again, I think it was done with the CGI from the film to begin with, and then it just edited the tail down and made it more lumpy in order to come out in vinyl better. But it has more of the character of the figure of the creature from the film, I think, from looking at it, at least face-wise. Especially if you were to, paint in the eyes and stuff like that. But I don't know. That's just me, though. Like, again, a lot of this is very sort of controversial, my opinion on this figure, and like if you feel differently, that's like totally your thing, go with it. But I feel like this is something that hasn't really been brought up all that much about this figure, and I feel like if you're paying this much for an X Plus, it's worth at least having the nerve to be honest about how you feel about it. Actually, I really like the feet on the Bandai. They did that really nicely. It's, if it focuses, yeah, you can kind of see that. It's a lot brighter on film here as it is in person. But again, they have a bit more elegance, a bit more dynamics to the way they sculpted that, and it really works. This one, even from this distance, you can see the difference. This one's more lumpy and weird, and the claws aren't sort of as nicely defined and curved, and these ones have the little, what would you say? They're like little lines that run through the claws to give them a little bit more little bit more texture, and that's kind of lacking here. The claws here are almost smooth. There's a little bit in there, but it's really well defined in Shin Godzilla that he had those kind of lines and the really long, sort of almost bat-like claws. I'll take these away. For our next size comparison, I'll bring in the Bandai Forms 2 and 3. No, Kamata-kun and Shinagawa-kun, and I've had this figure displayed with these quite a bit because I feel they scale up really nicely, even better than the King Series Bandai, because you know the tail thing and everything. So I feel like if you have these two, this one scales up really well with it. Especially if you like look at the scale of say the Monster Arts forms 2 and 3 with the Monster Arts figure, they go by this scaling roughly anyway. So yeah, that's a good little display option for this guy. If you got these two, these figures aren't like much to talk about. They're pretty simple, but I like them for what they are, as with most Bandai vinyls actually. Especially Kamada-kun, he's crazy. Shinagawa-kun, I'd like him to be standing a little more straighter, though. But Kamada-kun's pretty awesome. And as always, I'm gonna pair him up with a standard size Monster Arts figure, the birth version, Heisei Godzilla. I feel like this is like, in this scale, is probably the best 90s Godzilla you can get. Like this release was very solid, so I do really like the KKK Biollante figure that they released, the Kyoku or something, Kyoku. You can see him in the cabinet here, which is a bigger figure, but both of these are very good releases. Anyway, enough about that. You can see that's how they scale up. Roughly, he's just below his, like, probably at the height of his arms, really. And what else can we scale him up with? Yeah, let's scale him up with. I've already seen him. Oh god, hand always falls off of my Monster Arts. No biggie, but just don't want to lose it. We've already seen him with the Banpresto, but let's take a look with the SH Monster Arts, which this one also has a insanely long tail for the size of figure that he is. So stand this guy like that. We can barely fit both figures' tails into a shot like this, but okay. So that's these figures together. Again, I much prefer the Monster Arts. I know that I'm probably going to do a whole video on this, but I know that a lot of people like continue to sort of give this figure a bad rep because of the quality control issues that happened with that first release. But I feel like this figure is now a completely underrated figure, because if the Banpresto, like I did the video on the Banpresto, but I had this whole section on why I felt that that one was the most balanced and ultimately the best for the price Shin Godzilla figure. I feel like this one, after doing that video, I took a closer look at this one, and this one really, I don't know, there are definitely elements in this one that are better than the Banpresto as well, and just, it's a bit of personal preference, but this one really could be just the best Shin Godzilla figure, come to think of it. I don't know, it's really personal preference, and if you do get a fucked up paint job, then that sucks, and you're gonna hate this figure for that. But if you get a good one like mine, the actual, just the standard sort of paint job they did, I have no complaints about. Like, I don't mind the slight gloss or just like the lack of like the strong reds in the crevices, like say the NECA figure or the Banpresto, because it's not very noticeable on any of the figures, and it's an extremely hard thing to do very well and to come across. as movie accurate. Like even this one, it's got those red bits there, but unless you got a bright light shining on it or a light inside it, you can't see it. This thing ultimately just looks matte gray in person throughout in room lighting. So I have no complaints about the Shin Godzilla. Really, I love this figure through and through. Um, but that's just my thoughts on it. And yeah, so they size up like that. You know, this is a big figure, so he comes right up to his chest. And I may as well actually, good that I just remembered. I'm gonna compare him to some other X Plus figures. So you know, bring in the 30 centimeters line. So you can see this guy is smaller because he is in the 25 centimeters line. This one's kind of a short 30 centimeters one anyway. So even though this guy's taller, this guy, again, this tail, like, this guy's nothing on this guy's tail. And Final Wars, that one's a good one to bring in, because this is the sequential order, because we had this Japanese Godzilla followed by this one, so they go nicely together. Again, like, I feel like the quality of the sculpt on this figure and all my other SH Monster Arts figures was just far superior to the sculpt we got on this one. Even though like the texture style of Shin Godzilla is a bit different than most Godzillas, but I still I feel they could have pulled it off had they have put in more effort. And one of my favorite Godzillas, 1954. And again, these designs are sort of like, this one was very much influenced by this one, so it's cool to see these together. This is a really big 30 centimeters scale figure. So you can see this one, it kind of starts to look pretty small next to him. See him from the back. And since I'm here, what else can I pull down to compare this guy to? I'll bring in a Monster Planets King series. That could be nice. So there you go. This guy's a nice big figure too, very bulky, so it kind of complements this guy nicely. And yeah, that'll do for the size comparison. Now to my final thoughts. So I'm not going to reiterate a lot of what I said earlier in this video, because you've heard me repeat that so many times, but you know how I feel about the sculpt, and that they could have, that I love X Plus, but they could have done a little better. And I feel like a lot of other reviewers overhyped this figure, because when I saw the photos of this online initially, I was like, something is about that looks a bit off. But sometimes you get this thing where the photos can look a bit off, and then in person the figure looks beautiful. And all the reviews, and just at that time, all of them that I saw, completely hyped this thing up. They're like, oh my god, it's just like the movie, it looks amazing, blah 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 blah, and it just drove me to really want to get this figure. So I picked it up, and the moment I opened up the box, I mean, it came in this beautiful box, it looked awesome, it was huge. I opened it up and looked at it and went, it looks just like it did in the pictures. And I had just this feeling, because it was, you know, and I don't have this often, because I'm very selective and very careful about the figures that I choose. And this is probably the only time that I was really let down by figures. And it was sad, because, you know, it's one of my all-time favorite Godzilla designs by one of my all-time favorite Godzilla figure manufacturers, and I think it was my first like actual Japanese release X Plus 2. So I wanted something pretty awesome, and it's a good figure. That's all I'll leave it at. It's a good figure, but it's overrated, and they're going up a lot in price now. And if you like the sculpt, if you see the photos and you go, yeah, I like that, it does it for me, absolutely go for it. It's worth it if you can, find a good price for it and you feel that it's worth it. You're gonna get a big figure. It's gonna fill up your shelf space. It's gonna look awesome to you. Totally go for it. I really support you for that. But if you look at the pictures and you feel like the sculpt is just like, I don't know, I'm on the fence, then I'd say check out the Banpresto. Like, that's a figure that in person looks amazing. Like, some of the photos can look a little weird, but once you got it in hand and you just really look up in the right light and you're just looking at the detail in this thing, you can just look at it for hours and you can just admire what went into this. Which is something that just the longer you look at this one, the less I like it, but the longer I look at this one, the more I like it. So it's just one of those things. Anyway, guys, it's been a long video. This is meant to be like a quick review, but I guess just because I didn't have a script, by no means does that make it a quick review. So I need to think that through in the future. But thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I know there's going to be some very mixed opinions in there, and that's a very good thing, and I'm looking forward to seeing what all of you are thinking and feeling about this here figure. And I wish, just if whoever's picking up this figure, somebody in Tasmania, I believe, is watching, I really hope that you love this thing and you give it a really good home, because this is still a beautiful figure. It's a beautiful piece, and it deserves a really good home, and somewhere where it's going to get more love than I could ever give it, and that's ultimately why I'm letting it go. So thank you so much for watching. Keep on collecting. Just, yeah, enjoy all the kaiju goodness that we've got recently. It's been really good with all the films we're getting, all the figures that are coming out and all of that. And yeah, may all your vinyl be irradiated vinyl. Over and out.